Aditi, we can start.
Weldon Berry once said that the earth is what we all have in common. A very warm welcome to one and all. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful evening of World Environment Day. I, Aditi Tuteja, Senior Associate at Alliance Law Group, am delighted to organize this panel discussion along with my whole team of Alliance Law Group on the Draft Environment Impact Assessment Notification 2020. Without any further delay, let us start with little overview about the said draft notification. So recently, in the month of March, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change came out with a draft EIA notification 2020, which, if ratified, will replace and supersede the existing EIA notification of 2006. There are two popular views that has sufficed in the recent past, wherein on one hand, the environmentalists find that this notification seems highly regressive in nature and by the sentiment itself is likely to override most of the existing norms and laws that exist for the protection of the environment. Sorry to interrupt. Please mute your mics, all the attendees. So I'll just continue. And on the contrary, some feel that this notification is merely an amalgamation of the existing office memorandums, notifications, and orders passed by learned courts and tribunals in the field of environmental jurisprudence. We live in an era where sustainable development is the key to the future. However, when the future itself seems bleak due to the pandemic, that has spread its claws all over the globe, now the question arises, what really matters and what can be done away with? In the light of present circumstances and with the draft notification we afloat for the public opinion, the discussion on today as an individual and the stakeholders assumes the importance and matters the most as on today. That being said, I move forward and shall apprise everyone with the ground rules of this panel discussion. We will keep all the mic and video off for all the attendees. All the questions addressed to the panelists by the attendees should be written in the chat box below, and the moderator will randomly pick up the questions. All the panelists need to raise their hand if they wish to express their view. However, it will be at the discretion of the moderators. It is humbly requested that the panelists should express their view at the time of their turns only. The moderators can anytime intervene if the panelists are exceeding the time limit. The questions from the attendees will be taken after the panel discussion is over. There's a small disclaimer that ALG acknowledges and diverse opinions around the world and does not advocate for or against any position. The views expressed in this webinar are solely of the resources presenting them, and ALG does not endorse or oppose the perspectives expressed. Now I'm delighted to introduce the following speakers for the panel discussion today. Mr. A.V. Shah. He is currently Member Secretary of Gujarat Pollution Control Board. Mr. Shah has been actively involved and has successfully contributed in the functioning of the board for past 30 years. It is said that there is no age for learning, and Mr. Shah exemplifies this concept. He is currently pursuing his PhD in green power purchase. Ms. Ruchi Kohli. Ms. Kohli has been a part of the legal profession for past 19 years and is an advocate on record with Supreme Court of India. Her dedication towards her work has led to be the additional Advocate General for the state of Haryana. Dr. Marisha Sharma. Dr. Sharma has been a civil engineer with a master's in environment planning, PG diploma in analytic chemistry, and a PhD from IIT Delhi. She's practicing environment consultant with 19 years of experience of interacting with industries projects of private sector, public sector, government, as well as Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Next, Mr. Nikhil Nanda. He is the Managing Director of JHS Vanguard Laboratories Limited. Mr. Nanda's company solely handles all the retail stores of Patanjali throughout the airports in India. Mr. Bhuvan Goyal, Director of AP Refinery Private Limited, who is engaged in the field of food processing. His company is the largest producer of rice bran and oil all over India. They are also co-packers of the leading brands such as Saffola, Patanjali, Fortune, and Reliance. Mr. Jayesh Patel is a managing director at Aqua Air Environment Engineers Private Limited. Mr. Patel has been an environmental consultant, enabled various industries to obtain environment clearances in the state of Gujarat and other states. Now I will hand over the discussion to Mr. Yash Mishra, who's one of the founding members of Alliance Law Group. Sir, the mic is on you. So
Thank you so much, Aditi. My introduction will never come. For that, first of all, I would all the panelists who has agreed to come on the World Environment Day to discuss the important issue what we have in hand, and also thanks to my team who has got this panel in the one platform to discuss this important issue. As a professional, what I feel when we started this office in the year 2012, in fact, our first was what actually related to environment. So the environment laws are very, very close to us. And now the government is trying to adaptive changes in the field of environmental law, which has led to the growth of environmental jurisprudence in India. Because India, for the first time, to my personal knowledge, for the first time, India thought of this environmental law when India was part of the UN conference at Stockholm at 1972. Then after 8 years, that the Mother Act came, which is Environment Protection Act 1986. Then after 1986, the laws were very scattered. So there was notification in 1994. Obviously, my will develop on that. But after that, even then, the government tried to collate all the laws, which is now what we all know as an environmental expert, which is called as EIA notification 2006. Now after this 2006 notification, and the government was trying to evolve the law through office memorandums and executive orders. And this is I don't know, due to pandemic situation or no, this is the first time in this draft EIA notification, which is 2020, government is again trying to collate everything, whatever this they have passed in previous at one place. It is well known because the laws was so unclear to the common man and to the entrepreneurs in the industries, in fact, who are working at the grassroots level, and actually they are facing the brunt of running the industries, which itself is not an easy task. So with the publication of this EIA draft notification, we all believe there's yet another debate has been started, which need exhaustive perspective to understand. And that is why the whole panel is here, I believe. So I guess, I'll thank you all of you. I guess, Aditi, we can start with the panel discussion.
Okay, sir. I'll commence this panel discussion with my first question to Mr. Shah. So, sir, the notification that reflects that same is nothing but an amalgamation of existing office memorandums after the EIA notification 2006 and various orders passed by NGT to codify the law pertaining to EIA in one place. So what is your take on the same?
Good evening, everybody, and greetings of the day. That is the World Environment Day, for which we are here to protect the environment, and we are discussing on the issues with regard to the environmental notification which is brought out by the Ministry of Environment and Forest. And yeah, it's true that the notification, new notification which is coming is the amalgamation of all the notification and office memorandums and the directives of the court. I think this is the welcome move for the benefit of the regulators as well as the project proponents. And this notification, because earlier when after this plethora of the notification, office memorandum and all, to move along with the different types of notification, one has to go through the several papers, and this compilation, as you said, is a welcome move.
Now, may I request Dr. Marisha to shed her views on the same regarding that this is an amalgamation of existing office memorandums and the various orders which are passed by NGT. Do you think it should codify the law pertaining to EIA in all one place? What is your take, ma'am, on the same?
Okay, thank you, Aditi, and greetings to everybody. I would very quickly say that yes, to an extent, it is an amalgamation, but there are a lot of new things in this notification as well, which are derivatives of things which are in practice, or they are derivatives of certain orders and things like that. So very quickly, I would like to, if you permit me, give me about 5 minutes. I would like to share my screen and share with everybody who is watching what are the main points that are likely to affect them, especially from the point of view of the industry. Some things will work for them, some things will not work for them. So I'm just going to share my screen and just allow it. And I hope you're able to see. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I will not delve too much into it. I've just picked up some major points in this. Like, for example, I've touched on the issue of corporate environmental responsibility. It has been defined in this notification. There was an office memorandum which introduced the concept of CER. It's an excellent concept, except that what's happening now is that this CER gets applicable all the projects which come post 2018, and before that all the projects which got EC had got something called as ESR assigned to them or CSR assigned to them, which were to the tune of maybe 5% of the investment costs, which were extremely high. It's an extremely high percentage when you actually look that companies have to today put in about 2% of their profits anyways into CSR, plus they have to comply to CER. Therefore, some sort of a transition clause for those ECs which have been given pre the CER concept should also be there, so that it's like a punishment to those people who took ECs before, because the rate of commitment to environmental responsibilities pre-CER was much higher as compared to now. Then one of the major changes that you will see in this act is basically the introduction of the micro, small and medium enterprises. They have been given massive liberties in this particular act, which were not there in the previous act, in fact. And that is, I will touch this again. In this particular act, they have also defined modernization, which was previously also defined, but what is happening in practice is that there's a lot of confusion between modernization and another thing which is known as amendment. So if you look at the amendment form 4, there are things which are allowed as configuration changes, and configuration changes can also happen due to modernization, because it may require some change in process, technology, or maybe some debottlenecking exercises. So there is likely to be confusion. It's there today also, and it is likely to remain there in future also, because the amendment has not been that particularly defined in the notification. Then the new concept which has come in this particular notification is the introduction of prior environment permission. Earlier it was the prior environment clearance. Environment permission was being given, but it was being given only category B2 industries under the law which introduced the concept of district level SIAs. And now here the definitions have been very clearly given, and this is really going to help the industries, because there is no confusion left between what is B1 and what is B2. Earlier, it was the discretion of the expert appraisal committees, what they want to assign as B1, what they want to assign as B2. Now, the clarity is there. Also, clarity has been brought in terms of the project life, wherein they have broken down into phases of construction or installation, operation, and redundancy or closure. Also, clarity has been brought into study area. This was there, but it was there in the guidance manuals. It was not there in the law as such anywhere. Then Another thing that has been very interestingly, which I found here, was that when it came to the expert appraisal committee constitution, they introduced a clause which says chairman or chairperson or member shall not serve simultaneously in more than one authority or committee constituted under this notification. If you look at the constitutions currently, you will find a lot of overlapping of the committee members, same committee members being there in many committees simultaneously at state or center level. And so this effectively bars them from going into more than one committee. Very new concept that's come in is the technical expert committee. This technical expert committee, from what I am understanding by the language of the law, it is supposed to kind of undertake categorization or recategorization of the projects, for the purpose of this notification. However, this also allows them to make a site visit to any of the project or activity. So I'm not very sure, because the law does not describe anywhere else how this technical expert committee will function, and why are they supposed to visit a site if their job is only to undertake categorization or recategorization of the project. So this is again a gray area, but again, this is for the regulators. This doesn't concern the industry as such, but the regulators need to see how they need to clarify this for their own proper functioning. Another interesting thing that has emerged in this particular notification is in the stages of the prior environmental clearance or the prior environment permission process. Initially, in the previous notification, we had only 4 stages. And in this particular notification, there are now 6 stages, and all the 6 stages have been defined are to be followed category A projects. Only 3 stages have to be followed for category B2 projects, and in that also category B2 there are again two type of projects: those which will go to appraisal committee and those that will not go to appraisal committee. So again, that classification has been given, that how the verification will happen if the project is not going for the appraisal. However, when you go further down in the notification, these are the requirements which have been spelled for an appraisal. And this is a flowchart which has been given, like for a person who gets introduced into the system. This is actually not very clear. The flowcharts that were in practice or are given in the guidance manuals are far more clearer than the flowchart that has been put over here, especially with respect to the category A or B1 project. This one is very well defined, but this one needs further definition, definitely, so that people who are coming in new or facing the environmental clearance process for the first time do not get confused. The 4 stages should appear very clearly over here, which are not appearing. This is only from stage 5 onwards. So that is another issue. Then coming to the preparation of environment impact assessment report, for some reason here they have just restricted to the baseline data has to be carried by environmental laboratory duly notified under Environmental Protection Act. But when we go into the violation project, which is a later clause, I think clause 17 or 18, their NABL labs are also permitted. So there is in the same act, you need to have consistency. Either both labs are permitted or only one lab is permitted. And the MOEF recognition process also itself is a bit time-taking process. So, there should be flexibility in this particular thing. That's what it's my personal opinion only. And they are permitting baseline data generation. Why I like this portion? Because this is really helping the industry to cut down on the loss of time. What was happening earlier on when the 2006 notification came was that you were not allowed to generate baseline data till the TOR was issued. Later on, MOEF issued a circular where it was permitted to generate baseline data prior to your TOR.
Dr. Barisha, because we have a limited time, can you finish in next 1 minute? So
another one, okay, I don't think so, but I'll just try and cover 1 or 2 more points, and then maybe during the discussion I will try to touch some points. Then baseline data generation was, it had to be within 3 years of the time when you submitted the final EIA to MOEF. But here they have given a relaxation wherein you're allowed to the data should be within 3 years when you submit the draft EIA. So this is an advantage, perhaps. Public consultations, lot of liberties have been given, but then it's not very clear why some of them have been given liberties. Some of them have been given liberties because they are common effluent treatment plants or biomedical waste facilities, but otherwise the rest of them why they've been given, it's not very clear. Also, the consultation procedure has not been defined. You see, there are projects which don't require public hearing, and ministry themselves had described only publication, but the public consultation process has not been described. Only public hearing process has been described in this particular law. And very good thing that here in the notification for the public hearing, they have clearly said that the EIA report should be prepared in English only. In practice, many of the states had started asking entire EIA reports in the regional language. So that's another good point. And when it comes to the appraisal, very good thing, they are video conferencing to this. Video conference has been added. They're also saying that the project proponent may take assistance of an EIA coordinator, which means that the project proponent is allowed to make his own presentation, apparently by understanding the language of this. And this while they had been returned because there was no EIA coordinator or no functional area expert present with them. So the projects were actually suffering because of that. And this may help the people. And this is a modernization table that they have given. This has been in practice, but this they have really given out very nicely, giving a lot of liberties to the industries in this case to very quickly undertake small changes without going through the entire process. And another advantage is that when these expansions were happening, the public hearing had, according to the previous notification, the public hearing should have happened under the 2006 notification. While in this particular notification, they have not put any such restriction. It says it should have been conducted at least once during the lifetime. Again, this is good news for the industrialists as far as this is concerned. And they are sticking to the no increase in pollution load certificate, which again technically is not possible if you're going for the expansion. So I'm not very sure how that's going to work out. And coming to grant,
so Dr.
yeah,
Manisha,
coming to grant,
because we have almost 11
I
to
think
12.
I have just two or three more slides. Yeah, and very, very difficult for the industries would be this clause related to land acquisition. I think this is going to effectively stall a lot of projects because it will not be possible to acquire land. See, unless I don't have an EC or certain clearances in my hand, expecting me to own land or is not really very right in my personal opinion. So I'm not very sure how this is really not going to help the industry.
Because I don't, as I started in the beginning, that this issue is highly sensitive and complex, and what you are actually saying that I guess probably this will come in the next future course of questions. So I guess
Yes. So we will touch them. So let's stop it here. Maybe in the end, if we have time, 2-3 more points, whichever I have. Basically they're related to amendments, they relate to validity, and they relate to monitoring and violation cases. So and non-compliances. So these are the things which are basically new in this particular notification. I'm a little concerned about this particular point, wherein they are trying to augment the fund for implementation of EIA EMP, because this kind of gives the license to pollute, and what happens to the polluter pay principle. So these are certain concerns which are there. Liberties given definitely makes it easier for the projects to get implemented, but at the same time, at what cost? So I leave it at this, and let's see what else comes up during the discussion.
Right, absolutely right. So probably Aditi, now we can I guess all the industries are concerned now. Probably we can move to the next question. Aditi, please.
Yes. So my next question is, may I request Mr. Nanda to answer the same question? Sir, we all are aware that the entire world is trying hard to fight with this global pandemic and how it has affected the world economy at large. If we look at countries like USA and China, major environmental norms have been relaxed. Sir, do you think that India is following those steps with this draft EIA 2020? And what, in your opinion, could be the impact of this notification on the industrial sector if it comes to force? Like example, the increased requirements of sanitizers, PPE suits, and so the government actually eased the process of their grant of the licenses. So you being in that area, what is your take on the same?
See, I think this is a very welcome step, though late, but always welcome. And the biggest trouble that has been with most of the industries, the government on one side was wanting to promote area-based was coming out with area-based exemption schemes so that the industry moves to rural areas, creates employment opportunities. On the other end, getting environmental permissions in those areas were getting more and more difficult. So I feel this is a very welcome step. if you follow the Chinese model from 1979 till date, the main reason of the growth, and they have various cities which are considered as product specialist cities. Some like Ningbo is called a plastic injection molding city. Guangzhou is called the telephone city, where all the big brands of telephones are being manufactured. That has been possible because China has been very liberal with giving permissions in terms of setting up the industry. Having said that, I definitely align with what Dr. Marisha was saying, that we need to have certain checks and balances also, which is automatically put in place. Giving you an example, there used to be a rampant extra coverage of areas in all the construction activities in Delhi till early 2000.
Yes.
And then the government came out with a self-certification process where the architects who were responsible for that were to give out a certificate saying it is as per the FAR which is sanctioned by the authorities. And if there's anything excess found at any point of time, their license would be cancelled. So automatically it ensured construction happened on time, which was not happening earlier because people were wanting to do extra coverage. Similarly here, people were wanting to violate the environmental norms, and they were able to get away with it because once you have the permission, even if it's delayed, you are good to go and nobody is going to come and check. Now with this, you are going to go do your own self-certification, but you don't need to delay your project for that. You can go ahead, start the project from day one, your funds are aligned, your investors are there, you don't incur a cost overrun on account of interest and other costs just because there's a delay from environmental ministry. So it's very welcome.
Now I would request Ms. Kohli to express her views on the same point, ma'am.
Hi everyone. I think I'm pretty much in sync with what Mr. Nanda and Marisha have said. But Aditi, the question that you have posed, I think the basic inherent problem with this question is you're comparing a developing nation, which is us, with two developed nations who are completely developed and have their systems in place. We are still getting our systems in place. We are still getting everything in order. Let's not forget what is environment jurisprudence. Environment jurisprudence means that we have to ensure that the environment that we are living in is secure, is safe. And at the end of the day, we have to make sure that the quality of air that we are breathing, for example, has to be of good quality. So while it is good to relax norms, which is probably the need of the hour right now, I personally, on a personal level, would advocate that, yes, what has to be drawn is a balance. Relaxation of norms can be because today we are dealing with a situation where there's a pandemic. You gave the example of sanitizers. Yes, of course, today we need the sanitizers, we need the masks, we need the suits, we need them to be produced. So we need those industries which right now are in the production of these important products today. We need to give them that liberty to say that, yes, okay, some things can be relaxed. But what is most important to see, that relaxation should in no way be affecting the environment on a bigger or a more deeper scale. But yes, having said that, yes, balance needs to be drawn. You cannot sacrifice environment in the name of industries. That's the way I look at things on a personal level.
Moving further to the next topic of the EIA notification. So, Mr. Goyal, so what is your opinion on the change that EIA notification offers regards to now providing environmental permissions instead of the usual environmental clearances? Mr. Goyal?
Thanks, Aditi, for the question. I think this is a very interesting question. I'll just express the industry's point of view on the question. So, we are very much aware about the COVID pandemic, which is present as of now. And we are also aware about the industries which are moving out of China as of now. We very much want the industries to come to India. And I think this is a very welcome decision from the government's point that it is a step forward in the ease of doing business. When we talk about environmental permission versus environmental clearance, I think in previous one, environmental clearance, they had to, in case of in the previous 2006 notification, there was a major step which was about the assessment committee, site appraisal committee, and public hearing, which was a precondition and which delayed many projects and which made the projects unviable also. In the present scenario, there are particular industries which are kept by the department within in the notification, which are allowed to operate with a simple permission from the department. So I think this is from industry's point of view, it is a way forward for clearing the path for the industries to come and start operations in the country. But yes, at the same time, we have to keep an eye that the atmosphere is not penalized. The environment is not played with, but until and unless the teams at the center, they keep a good eye, they keep a good control over the permissions, I think it's a very welcome decision. And it will be a very stark difference from the previous notification. It will pave the way for the new growth.
Okay, moving forward. So my next question is to Mr. Jayesh Patel. Mr. Patel, all projects located within the notified industrial estates of the pesticides, like including insecticides, herbicides, weedicides, pest control, etc., and their specific intermediaries, obviously excluding the formulation, are now categorized as B1 in the proposed notification. So Mr. Patel, do you think the small states and the developing states have the expertise to appropriately apprise the risk associated with such kind of industries and give clearances?
No, it should not be categorized B1. It should be categorized 1994 and 2006 notification. Pesticide matter was dealt by India level central government, because Delhi central government has expertise all over from India. Some small states, some developing states may not have that expertise, and they may give permissions to hazardous operations and hazardous industries. As we know, the pesticide industry uses lot of solvents, chemicals, flammable substances, and so many. If they are not handled properly, there can be havoc. So whatever done so far at India level, at central level, it should be continued for pesticide specifically only. Pesticide and pesticide intermediates. It is good move that they have decentralized and they are trying to give power to states. But my question is, all states are capable? Of course not. So it should not be done.
So let me take the same question to Mr. Shah, who is being a part of the regulatory body. So what is your opinion on the same, of the categorization of B1 in the proposed notification?
Would you please make my video on, Aditi?
So your video is on. I'll
Our
just
our technical team is working on it, I guess, but probably there's some technical problem on your side. But you can continue with your response to Mr. Patel.
Okay. Okay, I am audible?
Yes, yes.
you're audible.
Yeah, now request came, video is on. Okay, fine. In fact, this schedule B1 category, that is a project to be located in an estate, should be permitted, and it is a thing that the pesticides or other herbicide industry and all, those are polluting industry, can be allowed as per the B1 category. I don't think any objection into this.
Mr. Patel, do you have an answer to this?
Yes, yes.
Please go ahead.
We all know, and day by day we are getting news. Accidents, number of accidents are very high in pesticide industries. 2 days ago, there was an accident in Dahej region, and 10 people, almost 10 people died. So, if proper risk assessment as well as screening, scoping, and appraisal is done, or from central level, it should, there can be a stoppage of such kind of incidents. Waste industries are okay, B1 categorization, but pesticide I am not talking about Gujarat, Yevisa sir, he is capable. Gujarat is capable. I am talking about some small states. You listen my answer carefully. Some small states where the expertise cannot be available, but they may start giving permissions.
We understand. We understand. Probably now, Aditi, we can move to the next question, please.
So now we'll move to the next topic.
Just a minute, I have some say on this. Just a minute.
Please
Yes,
go ahead.
sure,
Please
sure,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Shah.
Here the question of expertise doesn't arise because the authority which granting the permission at the state level or at the center level, they are being appointed by the central apex body, that is Ministry of Environment and Forest. And whether it's a developing state or non-developed state, the experts are well within the country and which are chosen by the state government. Subject expert are chosen, and the authority or the expert which are involved in the process of granting the permission are experts. But the JSY says that the accidents are happening. The accidents which are happening due to the negligence, due to the lapse of the safety. And here we are granting the environmental permissions. So the permission regarding to the environment and the permission regarding the safety are to the different aspect. The safety permission are looked after by this agency, Director of Industrial Safety and Health. And therefore, the mechanism which is established, I think it doesn't have any issues with this.
So now I can see that the panel discussion is getting hotter by topic. Now, Aditi, you can start with.
Can I add one thing?
Mr. Patel, I guess as I said, the topic is going hotter and hotter. I guess we can move to the next question and then we'll take the question after once the panel discussion is over. Aditi, please move on, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so my next question is from Ms. Kohli. Ms. Kohli, what are your views on the ex post facto EC, which has been allowed under the draft notification by merely asking for a monetary compensation, especially in the light of the light on the recent judgment that has been passed by Supreme Court?
Aditi, let's first understand what is ex post facto environment clearance. See, environment clearance is the law as of now. As of date 1994, the notification introduced the concept of environment clearance, and there was a reason why it was introduced. Basically, to understand that what impact would an industry which is being set up would have on the environment. Having said that, now an ex post facto cannot be an ex post facto environment clearance. You cannot say that, okay, here, look here, you can go ahead, set up your industry without taking EC, and we have no problems. You can come back once you're set up, you can come back and take the environment clearance from us. I don't think that's the intention of the legislature, because it is not just monetary. The new notification is not just talking about monetary compensation, but it is also talking about shutting down the industry in case it is found that the very setting up is not conducive to the environment. Now, not just that, the Supreme Court judgment is very clear when it says that ex post facto environment clearance is violative of the 1994 notification. Today, what we are dealing with is only a draft notification. It is something which is still under debate. It has not really come around as of now. But to say that yes, you can go ahead and we also need to understand the reason why an ex post facto environment clearance came around in 94. See, please appreciate 94 notification is the mother notification of all the notifications which came out subsequently, right? So once an environment clearance was granted in that, the reason it was a new law at that point of time, the reason why the government came around with this concept of ex post facto was because of being a new law. The government was giving leverage to the companies to be able to get the environment clearance. It is not saying you can work without getting it. Please mind you, neither the judgment says that nor the notification says that. Ultimately, what is important is that in 1994, industries had already been set up. To regulate those industries, it was important that an environment clearance had to be taken by them. So that was the whole concept. But today, when we very well understand that the law is an environment clearance has to be taken, We cannot forego this and say it is perfectly fine if I set it up without an EC, because I can pay money later and then rectify the mistake that has been committed deliberately. It is the intent. What has to be analyzed is probably the intention of the I would use the word erring party here, because it is a violating party, because what really transpired for them not to be able to take an EC to begin with. Not only that, I think also I would the concept of an environment clearance is preventive, right? And the concept of ex post facto is remedial. If you ask my personal opinion, I personally feel companies, if they are spending more money on remedial action as opposed to if they were to take an EC before commencing their projects. It's easier, cheaper, and it's better if they follow the law as opposed to violate the law and then pay a price for it. That's what I think that is what the Supreme Court is also saying in its judgment, that and it holds forward as of date, because this particular notification, since it is just a draft, what still holds forward is a 1994 notification where an EC is a mandatory requirement.
Dr. Sharma, being an environmental consultant who's already involved in the field of the work of at the ground level of this work, ma'am, I would like to have your views on the same.
So I will very quickly, touch one slide which I haven't presented so far, and I would like to explain. You have to understand the situation. Ministry also. The Ministry of Environment is a regulatory body who tries to balance environment protection with development. It has a very, very tough job, and if a violation has occurred, in that case, development, employment, all these things get affected. On the other hand, if you allow them to work, how do you allow them to work? So I think this is ministry's attempt at trying to address a scenario. And very interestingly, when dealing in violation cases, they have added, like previously also they took out a notification and how to deal with violation cases, but there, in practice, only those cases were taken up which had been either reported by the government or found during appraisal to be violative in nature. Now they have allowed for a suo motu application by the project proponent as well. And when such a situation happens, a project proponent, everybody is human, anybody can make a mistake. Yes, the law says that ignorance of law is not excusable, fine, but then eventually you do make mistakes. And what happens in such a case? So they have allowed for two scenarios wherein an appraisal committee, after reviewing your project, can decide in the negative and say, no, you have deliberately done all this, and direct foreclosure. Or it gives you an opportunity to remedy the situation by taking a positive note on that. And from law, by reading of the law, I am understanding that CPCB shall be issuing certain guidelines to how to assess this ecological damage, which is excellent initiative from the ministry side. And all this collection and data again has to be done through accredited or this environment MOEF recognized labs or NABL recognized labs, or by CSIR and all these things. So this is one aspect of it. The second aspect is the non-compliances. This was an issue which was never addressed before in any of the previous notifications or any OMs. So dealing with non-compliances again has been introduced in this particular notification, and these non-compliances are to be referred to the expert committee. Again, the notification is not clear why they have to be referred to the expert committee or when they have to be referred. They have to be referred, and accordingly some decisions are going to be taken, bank guarantees have to be taken, and it has to be ensured that these action plans are implemented. So yes, I think let's take it in the spirit that if you have an errant child and the errant child realizes or his mistake, or somebody reports him to the class teacher, do you make him sit out of the class forever and make him devoid of learning, or do you give him an opportunity to improve himself? That's I think that's the spirit of the law when it comes to this. Yeah.
I guess after this discussion, because the next question becomes very important, and Aditi, can you address the next question, please? Aditi, your voice is please switch on the mic, please.
Sorry. So my next question is to Mr. Nanda. So Mr. Nanda, in your view, could the proposed annual reporting of industries instead of half-yearly reporting of industries can lead to the incidence of irreversible impact on the environment? And will monetary penalty be enough in such a case, as a case in case of the proposed draft notification?
Well, Aditi, we must understand the government is only relaxing the reporting from 6 months to 1 year. They're not doing away with it. So I'm sure it is only a way of saying ease of doing business. They don't want to regenerate the same reports over a number of times in a year, rather limited to once a year. I'm sure industry would be very, very happy with this step, because when GST was first implemented, the biggest complaint of all the small traders was that there's so many reports that we have to prepare, and subsequently the government combined kind of 3 or 4 of the forms into one and made it one submission for the small traders. They eased a lot of reporting structure. So here they have been cognizant of the fact that we should reduce the reporting, number one. Number two, what you're saying is that would it lead to irreversible damage? No, because they are still liable to comply with the laws. They are still liable to follow the same procedure which they were to follow if it was 6 months. However, what you're saying, the third point, whether it will impact just by putting a monetary penalty on the industry, I think that's the biggest penalty. Taking you for an example, in US, if you were to get a car and get a loan on the car, probably your installment for the car is $500 a month, while your insurance is only $10. But if you have one black spot or a penalty on your license, the $10 insurance goes up to $50. You have 2 penalties, it becomes $200. You have 3 penalties, you have 14 days of community service, and your insurance cost goes to $500, which is equivalent to $500 what you pay for the car installment. So this is a big deterrent, which ensures that the traffic conditions in US is what it is and the traffic condition in India is what it is. Put a very high penalty in terms of monetary value, so that the person is always scared, and it's a big deterrence for the industry to do something which is not as per the law.
Let me ask Mr. Patel, what are his views on the same? That the proposed annual reporting by industries, and instead of now the notification, earlier it should be half yearly, now it is annual reporting. So what is your take on the same? How will it impact the environment?
It would affect environment negatively. It is a good move. And see, some big projects which were required 2 to 5 years for execution. And as per old law, we have to file every 6 months EC compliance report. What we were writing, in progress, in progress, in progress. 6 months for big project is a very small time. So it is a welcome move, good move.
I guess.
Aditi, can I?
Yes, Mr. Shah, please go ahead.
Yeah, here in Gujarat and some other part, I don't know, but there is a environmental audit system going on, because Gujarat High Court has once upon a time, they have mandated in 1995 through their order that environmental audit should be done. And as Mr. Jayesh Patel know very well, the environmental audit scheme is in practice in the Gujarat, and which was penalized by some courts also. And this audit, we are having a quarterly monitoring by the environmental auditors, which are penalized, which are empaneled by the board. And final submission of the report is annual submission. So I think this is a half yearly, instead of half yearly, yearly submission. It doesn't make any difference, because anyway, industries are submitting the quarterly report as well.
I agree. Yes, yes, absolutely right. So we, again, as we have started, we are going on the complex issues further and further. I guess the next question is more complex. So probably, let me please carry on, please.
Yeah. So my next question is to Mr. Bhuvan. So what do you think would be the consequence of allowing an industry to run for 6 months or 12 months, as the case may be, in case of obtaining a CTO without a prior EC? Should there be an action against the State Pollution Control Board issuing a CTO? Should that industry be also held liable? I think we'll take the next question then. Okay, I'll just move on to the next question. So my next question is to Dr. Marisha. Ma'am, presently various consultants being prey to unnecessarily paperwork feel that the procedure of the preparation of the EIA involves a duplication at various steps, like similar documents are required at various stages. Even the draft notification does not specifically solve this issue as per se. So what are your opinion on the same?
Yeah, you have correctly identified one thing. It's basically it's like a I mean it's not difficult to do it, but unnecessarily repeating something really doesn't help, neither to the regulator nor to the person who's trying to fill those documents. I mean, I will give you a simple example. Like, for example, baseline summary. It's required to be filled in form 2 in the MOEF portal. Now, there are technical challenges wherein that form 2, that particular section doesn't even appear in the form 2 on the online system when you press forward button. And then you have to press the back button and then fill it. But not everybody is aware of this. That is number one. Number two, it is, the information that has been asked there is already a part of the EIA. So either you do away with those sections of the EIA and ask for the report copy to be uploaded there itself, so that minimum information goes. Regulator's job also becomes very easy, because trying to go through 500 pages which are again repetitive, instead of that the person needs to go only through 50 pages and containing very concise data. So therefore, somebody actually needs to sit down. Maybe it will go as a part of my suggestion to the MOEF, that what are the things which can be amalgamated. Like, if I have to make a simple application for a modernization proposal, I have to submit form 1, I have to submit the pre-feasibility, I have to submit an addendum EIA. All of them are having the same information, only in different formats. Plus the form itself also has the same information. 4 times I'm filling the same information, and there is bound to be a mismatch, because humans tend to make error. So it really doesn't help anybody, and I think least of all the regulator themselves. They get bogged down, and no wonder they feel so stressed about the whole thing. So definitely some sort of streamlining is required. Streamlining is required to remove duplicacy. Yes.
Moving forward, now I would like to ask Mr. Shah. Mr. Shah, we are seeing some major issues in the public consultation process in EIA draft. Industries like soda ash, acids, petroleum, petrochemical dyes, biological waste, treatment plants, synthetics, paints, chemical fertilizers, and etc., which have a serious health issues that have been exempted from the public consultation process. And another category of projects have exempted from the public consultation process under this draft. In the absence of such definition, so what is your understanding? What could be the reason that there's such a vague exemption it's given in the draft notification?
I think the word project involving strategic consideration as determined by the central government,
yes,
that things to be kept in mind, because under the present slowdown economy situation, the government has a specific idea in the mind, the areas to be developed. That may be notified later, or that may be through the office memorandum or some orders, it may be executed. But the most of the things are very clear. The majority of the industries are located in the industrial estate, which are already under the present regime of the law, is already exempted from the public hearing. So you may say that there are certain industries like soda ash industry. So these are the area specific industry. Soda ash industry may establish only on the coastal areas. So for that development of the coastal area, it cannot develop into the hinterland area because it required the more water and quantum of the effluent disposal is also high. So it required the coastal area, it required the brine and all these things. So that type of industries are already located in that area. Therefore, I don't think that it affect the main aspect of the public hearing or main purpose of this environmental notification. I think it's a government has played very nicely and it is a very good move for the development of the industry to boost the economy. Or rather, I would say it's the booster dose for the industry.
Okay, sir, in furtherance to this question only, do you think it's fair to reduce the time from 30 days to 20 days for the public to submit their objections against the project?
Absolutely, it's a good move because as we are saying that it's a social media era, we are sitting here in Gujarat and you are sitting in Delhi and we are making this conference throughout the country. Or even I think I have gone through the list of the participants here on the screen. Almost every corner of people are joined in this webinar. I think people can be communicated in 20 days because the 30 days has been kept for the proper communication to the industry to pass on the message that the public hearing is kept on this day. So people can represent that idea.
Sorry to interrupt you, please, guys. Please mute your... Noy, can you mute?
Team, please mute the mic, please. Prannoy.
I repeat.
May I request everyone to please mute the mic before the panel discussion is over. We'll take the questions as and when the panel discussion is over.
Thank you.
May I repeat?
Yes, please.
The 30 days to 20 days time is reduced is a good move because we are in the era of a very well equipped communication system, and 20 days I think by email or by WhatsApp people can address the communication. So 10 days it doesn't, I don't think any difference will make. The only thing is that the people should represent their views.
Okay, moving further, my next question is to Mr. Patel. So presently in our country, unlike the West, there are two separate bodies which deal under the licensing, under the environmental laws, and the ones which, there are one which are required for licensing the environmental laws and one who are responsible for penalizing the violations under the aforesaid laws. So do you not feel that there should be just one body to ensure a better coordination?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I fully agree. There should be one body. And can you share my screen? Can you please share my screen?
Sir, you have to get me the PDF to share your screen. We'll share later on the...
I'll
yes, sir.
Later on. MOEF in the year 2014 formed one high-level committee to review various acts administered, and they submitted one report. That report itself says that there should be one agency for permitting as well as monitoring. It will give good result. The person who is giving permit knows what condition I have given, what parameters I have given. He can easily monitor that. It's a big exercise, but the report is there. But unfortunately, it was not implemented in Parliament. It was good exercise was carried out in the year 2014.
Now I would like Mr. Shah to also share his views that don't you think there should be one body for better coordination, unlike state and the center?
Here I will rebut the Jayesh Bhai because the environmental clearance ministry is granting the clearance to some of the projects which are of a national importance, you can say, or which require due care at the center. And the state level clearance has been taken care by the state level authority. So granting the clearance by the expert body and the implementation and the penal provision is being, if you look at the laws, state pollution control boards are the regulatory authority. So giving the hand to the regulatory authority for fining, I don't think it is a dual policy, because government has already defined the state board as a nodal agency or the agency for regulation of the law. Even court, even honorable court, which are giving the hands to the state board for recovering the fine, or the central board to recover the fine. I think the fine imposing body are the regulatory body. So it's a good move.
Okay, so now my next question is to Dr. Sharma. Ma'am, in the light of the LG polymer case of Vizag, do you feel that the projects in which synthetic organic chemicals are used for the establishment of large-scale industries must be appraised and cleared with the 3D risk assessment studies?
Aditi, see, risk assessment, in my view, is the domain of the factory inspector, and accordingly, whatever are the prerequisites that need to be fulfilled, because if you go through the Factories Act, the entire act again and again refers to risk, reducing risk or minimizing or eliminating risk to the health of the workers and of the surrounding people. Therefore, it should be in domain of there. Unfortunately or fortunately, for some reason, this subject matter has come into the domain of Ministry of Environment, and risk assessment is a part of the EIA. And if it's necessary in very complex projects, then it should be done, but it should not be a blanket direction, because a blanket direction will unnecessarily add additional study to the whole process. So that is my take on it, that it's actually not the domain of MOEF. It should be left to the domain of factories inspector when he gives his permissions.
So the last question of this panel discussion will be to Ruchi ma'am. Ma'am, what is your take on sustainable development? It is highly appreciable that all the stakeholders today, including the industries as well as the government bodies, put in their best efforts to regulate the development. However, the fact that the natural environment remediation that has taken place during this lockdown is unparalleled. Do you think a partial closure of in the form of a systematic planned holiday for a few days is the key to this?
That's a very interesting question, Aditi. If you ask me personally, I think I'm in complete favor of lockdown. I've enjoyed the lockdown, and it's not only yielded good results where insofar as personal lives are concerned, but it is also very, very beneficial for the environment in general. See, if there are no cars on the road, if the factories are not working, there are no fumes in the air, the water is not getting polluted because people are not throwing waste in the water. The idea is to let the earth breathe and renew itself. That's the idea. So if you ask me personally, I really think that it is very feasible to do a 15-day lockdown going forward on an every yearly basis world around. We have all gone through it. What has happened right now is literally this lockdown has been slapped on our faces because of the situation that got created. No one could wriggle out of it because everyone wants to be safe. At the end of the day, this was unplanned. But I don't see any reason why we cannot have planned lockdowns. There may be an opinion, which, especially from the industries, who might say that we might lose money, we might lose the infrastructure, economy will go down. How will we pay our employees? But see, this is an unplanned closure. But a planned closure is something which can really benefit the environment in the longer run. Point an example. Now, I don't know if that is really, we've seen a message being circulated on all the social media that Ganga is being cleaned even without spending even a single penny, even though so many crores of money was earmarked just to clean it. Yet within a period of 15 days, The water cleansed its own self. Point in concern, we've heard Marine Drive is seeing dolphins. I think that's amazing. I won't go very far. We crossed DND, we crossed the Yamuna River. We've seen pictures. I don't know who's taken them, but I have personally seen pictures of it looking sparkling clear water. I could have never imagined having sparkling clear water on the banks of Yamuna, right where people tend to dump things. Industrial dump is there, industrial waste is there. So I think, yes, I think it is a positive, if taken in a positive direction, I think it is something which is very feasible and which must be incorporated. I am not sure how others feel about it, but as I said, on a personal and professional and environment level, I think it's a very welcome decision. Very, very welcome.
Now I would like Mr. Nanda to share his views on this topic of sustainable development and a partial lockdown for a few days as a person who is in the industrial sector. So what is your take on the same? We have heard Ruchi ma'am supporting environment and suggesting a lockdown, planned lockdown. Mr. Nanda, so are you there?
I think
Hello.
consent. We'll take his consent. Since he's quiet, silence is consent.
Aditi, I think I'll like to add something to it.
Okay.
There's no doubt what Kohli ma'am said. That's all well, but when she said that without spending a penny, I think we shall not forget that we are paying a huge price for cleaning the atmosphere, for cleaning the environment. If the industry is not running, that's a huge price we are paying. If the labor is migrating, we are paying a huge price. So it is not like that in the Western countries, the industries are not running. The industries are running in those countries also, but it is in balance with the atmosphere. It's about educating the industry. It's about coming out with the sustainable solutions. There was one very interesting study which I read in a paper some time back, which said that we should look at the industries which are running in Asian part of the world and the Western countries. Very strategically, we are producing or we are dealing in the industries which are polluting. Suppose we are producing rice, which is very much water consuming. We are dealing in alcohol, distilleries, and many more industries which are polluting. We are not exporting the products. We are exporting water out of our country. So it is up to the industry, up to the country, up to the leadership that they shall guide the country, guide the industry, that which industries we shall deal in, how shall we do it in a sustainable manner. Closing the industry might not be sustainable. We have seen that when we try to go for mass closures or say we shall plan for 15 days holiday, there might be one violator and one violator triggers the whole industry to restart. So on ground level, there are many difficulties if we are going to implement any holidays or any breaks. So the best solution would be to be in sync with the atmosphere. We shall be learning and doing the business in a sustainable way.
Okay, now we are over with the questions. Now we have so many questions on our chat box and our Facebook Live. Lastly, I would like to add Mr. Nanda on this topic as well. So what is your take on the sustainable development and the partial lockdown for few days for the environment? We couldn't hear you last time.
Yes. So, are you wanting to know on the reduction of the time period or this?
Sorry, sir.
I guess Ruchi can just briefly say what she has.
Mr. Nanda, to put it in one line, are you in favor of shutting down for 15 days to cleanse the environment?
Well, that's a very welcome step. But
we had taken your silence as consent.
I said, but everything has a downside to it. Every coin has two sides to it. But yes, if we see in a very holistic manner, I would say yes.
Thank you, sir. So Mr. Mishra's permission, we are over with the questions. Now I'll be taking the question from all the attendees, and we have so many questions. So I'm just picking the first question, that is from Mr. Ajay Gupta to Mr. Shah. So queries from public can be entertained by SPCB either through email or WhatsApp. Are these modes of communication authentic?
Yes, we should not only the email and WhatsApp, but even Twitter complaints we are entertaining. Central Pollution Control Board has made a system. They are issuing the ID to the Twitter complaint, and the state board is also responding to that, and state board is also entertaining the complaint on Twitters as well.
Your mic is off.
So one more question is addressed to you from a person named MP, I don't know. So my question to Mr. Shah is harmony between legislature and actual decision making possible in the context of EIA and EC laws possible in the recent times?
I couldn't get you properly. Would you please elaborate?
Yeah. Is harmony between legislature and the actual decision making possible in the context of EIA or EC laws are possible in the recent times?
Yeah, it is possible, because if you look at this new notification, there was certain difficulties which the implementer or decision making, because every now and then we have to refer the office memorandum and all these things. So legislator has found that the decision maker are having some difficulty in doing all this. So they compiled and modified the law. So this is a clear example of harmony between the legislator and implementer.
Okay, so now next question is from Mr. Atul to Ruchi ma'am. Is this notification came into force as it is, or a revision after comments inclusion? Can it be challenged in the courts and state? And can the clause of NABET approved by EIA consultant be challenged, or any environmental consultant can work for EIA preparation?
So I think I'll break your question into two parts. The first part is whether the present notification can be challenged or not. Look, it is still a draft notification. And whether there'll be further, because as of now, the notification has invited objections from people and stakeholders to give their opinions as to whether it affects them or they have any opinions with regard to that. To that extent, I think if you have an issue with that as of now, you must give your opinion with regard to the draft notification. Once the final notification comes, and if there is something which is arbitrary and contrary to law, yes, that can be challenged. Why not? But what has to be established is that there is something which is arbitrary, there is something which is violative of the law, there is something which is not in sync with the prevalent law in as of date. That is answering your question number one. What was the second part of it?
Can the clause of NABET approved EA consultant can be challenged, and any environmental consultant can work with the preparation of this EIA?
I think in so far as the second part of the question is concerned, I think accreditation of consultants through the NABET procedure is already under challenge before the various high courts. I think Mr. Yash Mishra would be a better person to answer, because his firm is handling this particular issue for the past almost 8 to 9 years now. So yes, it is something which I think I would hand over to Mr. Mishra to answer.
I'll say on the environment day, I will not touch that part of it, because again, as I said, it's a very complex issue. So as of now, for what is us to understand, again, in my previous webinar, I have seen the question. People are just trying to rush to the code. The important thing is we have to understand the law as a lawyer, as an industry, or as any professional, and then move forward. The idea is, again, just not rush to the code and okay, no, we will challenge this, we will challenge. If it is challengeable after the final notification, so far as the draft notification concerned, it's premature. So hold the horses. Let's have the final notification. We'll take care of it.
Okay. Next question is from Umang to Mr. Jayesh Patel and Dr. Marisha. Doesn't encouraging the practice of constructing first and trying to get a EC later violate the precautionary principle, which is also the essence of EPA 1986? I'll first ask Dr. Sharma to share her views, then Mr. Patel. Should I repeat the question?
Yeah, definitely it is a violation, but nowhere does the notification encourage you to do these kind of activities. It just gives you a clause on how to address such violations, and in that clause it also refers to closing down your project. So you cannot work on the assumption that I'm going to violate and then I'm going to go and I'm going to get regularized. You may not get regularized, and for all you know, 90% of the projects may not get regularized at all, and you will be shut down. We have had cases where NGT has directed for demolition of fully constructed buildings. So there's no reason why MOEF also cannot take that kind of a stricter stand following suit. So I don't think people should develop that kind of an attitude that, okay, let's violate and we have this violation clause and then we'll go and get ourselves regularized. There is no guarantee it's not a guarantee that's given to you. Yeah. Jayesh
I'm
Patel,
in
sir.
agreement with what Marisha says, because this is what the whole point is. The intention of the legislature cannot be to give you that, to serve it to you on a platter to say that, yes, here you are, you can violate, you come back later, I will rectify your violation. That cannot be the intention. Adding on to what Dr. Marisha was saying.
May I?
Yeah.
I think it is also, you can conclude from the recent judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court, where the 3 of the industries in the Gujarat has been fined heftily because of the post facto EC.
Okay, so Mr. Patel, what are your views on this?
Yes. Nobody will select that route. First thing will not happen. And some projects happened, they were unknowingly carried out their activity. Then they realized there are so many environmental clearances. They are complying. So I think nobody can purposefully do this. And as Marisha ji said, there is no guarantee that he will get environmental clearance. So the big risk is there. Nobody will do such. Nobody will take such risk.
Here I must say that there are in the government, we are coming across varieties of the cases of violations where the increase of the production or the change of the product and others, knowingly or unknowingly, the violators are being caught. So I think there must be some restriction on through the system, and this is the good thing that the MOEF has incorporated this in the law in this modified notification.
Okay, my next and the final question is from
And Aditi, may I just interrupt? I have a question for Mr. Nanda and Mr. Goel.
Okay.
That's my personal question. Do you guys, do we understand what these are the environmental experts who can deal with this environmental with at their on the back of the hand? So when it comes to the environmental law, so is as an industry, do you guys feel, yes, the environmental laws are very clear so that how, as the violation, we are talking about the violation right now, do you feel that sometimes you do something and it happened to, oh, I have violated something? So have you experienced anything like that? I'll start with Mr. Nanda.
What was the last thing you said? Your voice cracked in that.
I said, do you feel any kind of problem with that? Okay, you have not done it something deliberately, but it happened and it's in violation of the environmental law.
Well, bona fide and malified intent can be very easily identified in all the mistakes that people do. And most of the environmental laws, I feel, in general, are made to protect the environment, and we should all follow those laws. But yes, at times we've noticed there are certain things specific to the area which could probably be done away with, considering the demography of the local area or the plantation and other things of the local area. The laws are sometimes made with a larger perspective of the state or the country at large.
I guess Mr. Goel, would you like to add on to on that thing?
Yeah, I would like my last and final question. To Mr. Nanda and Mr. Goel. So as far as the lockdown
Yes.
is concerned, how do you stop such plants who are working 24/7? And isn't it the responsibility of the industries to keep the track of their emissions?
Can you please repeat?
Yeah, so as far as the lockdown is concerned, how do
Ji.
you actually stop these plants who work 24/7? Isn't it the responsibility of the industries to keep the track of their emissions that are coming out of the industries?
Ji, I'll say first I'll add something to what Mr. Yash asked about the clarity of the laws and bylaws and all the regulations to the industry. I think there is very lag in that. There is lack of clarity at the industry level. We are very much unaware of many laws, because whenever you come across a difficulty, then only you get into the depth. Otherwise, you don't have much of clarity. And now talking about what Aditi asked, that for a continuous process, when it is shutted during the lockdown, about the emissions. See, when you're talking about a continuous process, ours is a continuous process. You cannot just start and stop it in an hour or two. It takes 2 or 3 days to start, and it takes 2 or 3 days to shut it down. When you have a long shutdown, say 2 months, 3 months shutdown, even then you cannot just leave the plant alone. You have to have some staff there, some responsible person present at the plant who will keep tag of the situation. There could be any untoward thing that can happen, like ours is a explosive industry, so there could be a short circuit. We have seen many industries in hosiery industries.
Mr. Goel, your voice is cracking.
I guess.
During hello, am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. So during lockdown also, you cannot just leave the industry aside. Additionally, when there are national holidays, say there's a Diwali time, there's a other festival, even then you cannot leave the plant unattended for a day or two. Fortunately, we are a multicultural country. That helps a lot. But this lockdown, that has been a very tough part to look into the day-to-day emissions or any other untoward incident in the plant. Yes, we have to keep a tag.
Now I'll have Mr. Nanda to share his views.
Well, in 24-hour working industry, when we work 24 hours, fortunately, we don't have that long a startup time. We work on a different industry, but it does get difficult if you stop the industry completely. And we did have problem restarting, I would say, setting everything in order in terms of machine, manpower, material, and then getting into the night shifts gets a little complicated. Once it is running, it takes a while before you can really get it back to normal situation.
Thank you. So now I will give the floor to Mr. Yash Mishra, who's the founding partner of Alliance Law Group, to give his vote of thanks and conclude the panel discussion. Over to you, Mr. Mishra.
My team is saying that we have got immense questions, but due to the paucity of time, obviously we cannot take each and every question. For me, or if I'd like to conclude, and I would say for the time immemorial and for the generation what we have been hearing, that India is a developing country, and what we feel is India has to still a mile away to be a developed country. And during this process of the growth of the economic ladder, we're still facing the age-old dilemma, how to balance the environment and the industrial growth. In fact, during this, there's a recent meeting between the 15th Finance Commission and the Ministry of Environment and Forest, where they are trying to change this, bring changes in the environmental laws, which will give rise to the ease of doing business. Therefore, and I guess as my colleagues started with, Earth is indeed what we have in common. So we must use it judiciously and wisely, but definitely not at the cost of inhibiting our economic growth. In fact, one of our ministers has recently stated somewhere, especially in this COVID-19 situation, that we have to maintain balance on three things, which is ethics, economy, and the ecology. On this note, I'll thank all the panelists. Thank you so much for the, I'll thank all the audience who will be the part of it. I'm sure we have learned something. We will get some clarity on this thought process. In the end, all the questions will be taken on the emails and will be answered separately. Thank you so much all.
Thank you, Yash ji.
Dhanyavad, Namaskar or Jai Hind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yashji. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.